Chapter 1. The box arrives. I wasn't expecting a package that morning. My days were usually predictable. Wake up, go to work, come home, repeat. So when I opened the front door to find a small, unmarked cardboard box sitting on my porch, a strange feeling settled in my stomach. There was no return address, no label, just a plain brown package, slightly damp from the morning dew. I glanced around the quiet suburban street. No delivery truck in sight. No footsteps retreating down the sidewalk. Nothing. For a moment, I hesitated. It could be a mistake. Maybe it was meant for one of my neighbors. But when I crouched down, I saw my name written in neat black ink across the top. Ethan Carter. I had no choice but to take it inside. Sitting at my kitchen table, I examined the box carefully. It wasn't heavy, but there was definitely something inside. Something that shifted slightly when I tilted it. I ran my fingers along the edges, feeling the rough cardboard beneath my fingertips. A dozen thoughts ran through my mind. Was this some kind of prank? A gift from an old friend? But no one had mentioned sending me anything. I exhaled sharply. Enough stalling. Grabbing a knife from the counter, I carefully sliced through the tape. The flaps popped open, revealing a single black VHS tape. I frowned. The cassette was old, the kind from decades ago, with no label, no markings. It just sat there, nestled in a bed of crumpled newspaper. I lifted it out carefully, turning it over in my hands. The plastic casing was slightly scratched, the edges worn. Something about it felt wrong. A chill ran down my spine. I didn't own a VHS player. I hadn't even seen one in years. So why was this here? And who had sent it to me? I reached back into the box, searching for a note, a clue, anything. But there was nothing, just the tape and the newspaper. I considered tossing it in the trash. But some part of me, the part that was too curious of my own good, refused to let it go. Instead, I grabbed my phone and texted my friend Mark. Hey, weird question. Do you have a VHS player? A few minutes later, he replied, Yeah, why? I just got an old tape in the mail. No idea where it came from. Thought I'd check it out. Dude, that's how horror movies start. I rolled my eyes. Yeah. Can I bring it over? Fine. But if we get cursed, I'm blaming you. I chuckled, but a small part of me felt unsettled. Mark wasn't entirely wrong. Grabbing my keys, I slipped the VHS tape into my backpack and headed for the door. Something told me that whatever was on that tape, I wasn't supposed to see it. Chapter 2, the tape plays. Mark's apartment was cluttered. As usual, empty pizza boxes stacked near the couch, an overflowing bookshelf teetering in the corner, and a desk covered in half-finished projects. His latest hobby was restoring vintage electronics, which was why he had a working VHS player in the first place. You weren't kidding, he said, holding up the black cassette. This thing looks ancient. I dropped onto his couch. Tell me about it. No idea where it came from. Mark examined the tape like a detective studying evidence. No label, no markings. Could be anything. Home video? Old TV recording? Porn? He wiggled his eyebrows. I groaned. Just put it in. With a smirk, he turned his entertainment setup. A Frankenstein's monster of retro and modern tech. He popped the tape into the player, pressed a few buttons, and the screen flickered to life. Static. For several seconds, it was nothing but white noise, the flickering black and white fuzz of an old television struggling to find a signal. Then, slowly, an image formed. A room, dimly lit, bare. A single chair sat in the center, facing the camera. The walls were cracked, peeling. A concrete floor. I felt my stomach tighten. Looks like some kind of basement? Mark muttered. The image wavered, like an old security camera feed. For nearly a minute, nothing happened. Then, a figure stepped into frame. A man, thin, dressed in dark clothing. His posture was rigid, unnatural, like a puppet on invisible strings. He moved toward the chair and sat down. His face was obscured by shadows, but something about him felt familiar. Then he looked up, and I stopped breathing. Because it was me. Mark let out a low whistle. Dude, what the hell? I couldn't respond. My own face stared back at me from the grainy screen. But there was something off. The version of me on the tape looked paler, thinner. His eyes were sunken, hollow. On screen, I sat completely still, silent, just staring. Then, without warning, the tape skipped. A sudden cut. Now, the chair was empty. The camera zoomed in slightly, as if searching for movement. But the room was still. Another cut. The chair was back. But this time, something was different. Someone else was sitting there. Not me. Not anyone I recognized. Just the shape. A shadow. Tall. Featureless. Looming. Then, the screen glitched again. And I felt something move behind me. A whisper of air. A shift in the room's energy. I turned instinctively. But nothing was there. Mark cursed. Jesus, this thing is creepy as hell. I swallowed hard. Rewind it. What? Rewind it. Play it again. He hesitated, then pressed the button. The tape whirred, the screen flickered. But when it played again, the footage was different. The chair was still there. The basement. The cracked walls. But there was no one in the frame. No version of me. No shadow. Just an empty room. The breath caught in my throat. That wasn't what we just saw. Mark leaned forward, eyes narrowing. Okay, what the actual hell? We sat there in silence, the static on the TV filling the air like white noise in my skull. Then my phone buzzed. I pulled it out with shaking hands. A new text message. No sender. No number. Just 5 words. You shouldn't have watched that. Chapter 3. The Hidden Message. I couldn't breathe. I stared at my phone, the screen flickering with that unsettling message. You shouldn't have watched that. My fingers trembled as I gripped the phone tighter. Who could have sent this? Was it connected to the tape? To the strange, unfamiliar person in that basement-like room? I glanced over at Mark. He was still sitting there, staring at the TV screen, his face pale. Dude, this is freaky. I nodded, still frozen, my mind racing. I opened the message again. I needed to understand. Maybe it was just some prank. Maybe it was one of my friends messing with me. But who sent this? I typed back. No response. I tried call back the number, but the line was dead. No connection. Mark, I said quietly, my voice strained. I think we need to look deeper into this tape. Mark's expression shifted to something darker, more serious. You think someone's messing with you? But that wasn't just some weird recording. That's not even possible. I shook my head, feeling the weight of the situation settle in. I don't know, but I'm starting to think that whoever made this tape, whoever sent it, is trying to send me a message, and it's not good. I took a deep breath. What if this isn't just some stupid prank? What if we're dealing with something much worse? Mark didn't respond, but I could see the fear creeping into his eyes. We stared at the blank screen for a long time, both of us lost in thought. Then I noticed something. The TV had glitched again. The room on the screen flickered, and for a brief second, I saw something move. Something just out of frame. Did you see that? I asked, my heart pounding. Mark leaned in, narrowing his eyes. Yeah, what was that? I was already reaching for the remote. I rewound the tape once again, my hand shaking with every click of the button. When the image reappeared, I pressed play. At first, nothing seemed different. The empty room, the chair, but then, just as before, the glitch happened. But this time, I saw it clearly. There was a figure in the corner of the room, shadowy, indistinct, but it was there. A face. It wasn't anyone I recognized. It was just a blur at first, but then, as the glitch settled, the figure came into sharper focus. It was a man. His eyes were wide, black, and unblinking. His mouth was twisted in a grotesque smile. My blood ran cold. Mark! That wasn't there before. Mark stared at the screen, his face a mixture of fear and disbelief. I don't like this. You should stop. I was already reaching for the remote to pause the image. The man's face was now completely visible. He was staring directly into the camera. His eyes seemed to pierce through the screen, locking onto me. The phone buzzed again. Another message. This time it was different. I'm closer than you think. I dropped the remote. The message echoed in my mind, over and over, a terrifying whisper. Mark stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. This is insane. I'm done with this. But I couldn't move. I couldn't look away from the screen. Something was pulling me in. The man on the tape wasn't just some random figure. It wasn't just a coincidence. He was looking at me. A cold chill ran down my spine. My phone buzzed again, but this time I ignored it. Mark, we need to figure out who's doing this. We need to. But Mark wasn't listening. He was already grabbing his jacket, heading for the door. Come on, man. I'm out of here. This is too weird. I reached out to stop him, but as I did, something in the air shifted. The lights flickered, and the room seemed to grow darker. Mark. He froze. His hand was on the doorknob, but he wasn't moving. He was staring at something in the hallway. I stood up slowly, turning toward the door, and that's when I saw it. A shadow, a figure standing in the dark hallway, just beyond the door. For a split second, I thought it was Mark's reflection, but then I realized the figure was not Mark. It was the same man, the one from the tape, the man with the grotesque smile. My heart pounded in my chest, and before I could speak, Mark slammed the door shut, his body pressed against it. He was panting, his eyes wide with terror. That thing is out there. I grabbed my phone again, my hands shaking as I checked the time. It was late, way past midnight. The message I had received from the unknown sender echoed in my mind. I'm closer than you think. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door, a soft knock. I didn't answer. Neither of us moved. The silence in the room grew unbearable. Mark and I both stared at the door, waiting for something, anything to happen. But it didn't. The knocking stopped. The room stayed still, until I heard the last message, a whisper in my ear, I'm here. I spun around. There was no one there. No one. But when I turned back toward the door, I noticed something. The shadow in the hallway was gone, and in its place on the floor, a single crumpled note. The note was addressed to me. You know what's next. Chapter 4. The note. I stood there, frozen, staring at the crumpled note that now lay in the hallway. The silence was deafening. Mark had backed away from the door, his face as pale as the moonlight shining through the window. The air felt thick, as though every breath I took required more effort than the last. The knocking had stopped. The shadow in the hallway had disappeared. But the note, it lingered, almost taunting me. Mark spoke first, his voice barely above a whisper. Are you going to open it? I didn't answer. I couldn't. Something inside me screamed not to touch it. Everything had escalated so quickly, and I was terrified of what might happen next. But I knew I had no choice. There was no going back now. Slowly, I reached for the door handle and pulled it open just wide enough to peer out. The hallway was empty, but the note was still there, lying innocently on the floor, as if it had always been waiting for me. I bent down and picked it up with trembling fingers. The paper was smooth, yet there was something about it that felt off. Something too clean, too perfect for a note that had just been left in a dark hallway. I unfolded the paper and read the words scrawled across it in jagged, uneven handwriting. You've been warned. The game has started. Your past is catching up to you. I felt a chill run down my spine. The words seemed to echo in my mind, repeating over and over. What did it mean? Your past is catching up to you. I glanced at Mark. He was watching me with wide eyes, his fear palpable in the way his shoulders were hunched, as if ready to run at any moment. What do you think it means? He asked, his voice trembling. I shook my head. I don't know, but I feel like whatever's happening is not random. I folded the note back up and stuffed it into my pocket, my heart pounding in my chest. It felt like I was on the edge of something terrifying, but I couldn't put my finger on it. Do you think someone's been in here? Mark asked, his eyes scanning the room. Someone must have been in here, right? This isn't just some sick joke, is it? I don't know, I replied, running my fingers through my hair. I really don't know. For a moment, we stood there in silence, both of us lost in our own thoughts. Then the air shifted again, this time It was more subtle, like a presence had entered the room without us even noticing. Suddenly, the phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out quickly, my hands slick with sweat. It was a text message from an unknown number. I hesitated for a moment, then opened it. The message was short, almost simple, but it chilled me to the core. I know what you did. I felt the room close in around me. My breath hitched. I looked at Mark, who had already moved closer. His curiosity piqued. "Who is it from?" he asked, his voice tight. I don't know. I whispered, still staring at the message. But they know something. Something they shouldn't. I stood there for a moment, my mind racing. Who is this person? How did they know so much? Suddenly, a sharp sound echoed through the room. It was a loud thud, like something heavy had fallen. I whirled around, searching the room, but saw nothing. No one. Mark had jumped at the noise, but he didn't speak. He just stared at the door, his eyes wide with terror. He was visibly shaken, his body rigid, waiting for something else to happen. And then it did. The door creaked, just a tiny bit, like someone on the other side was pushing against it. We both turned toward it. The handle was slightly moving. I didn't know what to do. Should I open it? Should I even be standing here? I wanted to scream, to run, but something in the back of my mind kept me rooted to the spot. With a trembling hand, I reached out and grabbed the door handle. The room was still. The air was thick with tension. I opened the door a crack, and the hallway was empty again, except for one thing. There was another note. This one was different, though. It wasn't folded like the first one. It was attached to the door, taped there, as though someone had been waiting for me to find it. I took it down, my fingers brushing the paper. The note was written in the same messy handwriting as before. The past always catches up. You're too deep now. There's no going back. I felt my blood run cold. This wasn't a joke. This wasn't some sick prank. This was real. I glanced at Mark, and I could see the fear in his eyes. He was terrified, and I couldn't blame him. I was terrified, too. "What do we do now?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. I didn't have an answer. The room felt like it was closing in on us, and with every passing moment, it felt like we were being watched. We had to find out who was doing this, who was sending us these messages, and why. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I might already know. Something from my past. Something I couldn't escape, and it was only just beginning. Chapter 5. The past unraveled. The walls seemed to close in tighter with each passing minute. The uncertainty in the air thickened, wrapping around us like a suffocating fog. I couldn't stop thinking about the words on the note. There's no going back. The idea that whatever was happening wasn't a coincidence was becoming increasingly real. My heart raced as I tried to make sense of it all. "Mark," I whispered, feeling my throat tighten. "We need to figure out who's behind this. We can't just sit here and wait for the next thing to happen." Mark looked around the room nervously, his eyes darting from corner to corner. "How? Who could be doing this to us? And why? It doesn't make sense." I didn't have a solid answer, but I knew we couldn't let fear paralyze us. We have to start from the beginning. We need to look at everything that's happened, everything that's changed. Mark nodded slowly, though it was clear he was still shaken. His hands were trembling as he gripped the edge of the table. I just want to know what's going on. Who's behind all of this?" I let out a heavy breath. We need to go through everything. Let's start by looking at the messages we've received. Maybe there's something we missed. We sat down at the table, each of us holding our phones. I scrolled back through the text messages, rereading every word with a sense of dread. The first message, "I know what you did," still haunted me. But it wasn't just the message itself that unsettled me. It was the timing. Why had it arrived the night the notes began appearing? And why was it so vague? What did they know? What had I done? My mind wandered back to the events of the past year. There was one moment that stood out, a time when things had started to go wrong. It had been so small at first, just a feeling, a lingering unease. But now, looking back, it felt like that moment was the first step toward everything that had followed. Mark was staring at his phone screen, his face as pale as a sheet. "Wait," he said quietly, pointing at his phone. "Look at this. Look at the last message I got." I leaned closer to him, my heart pounding in my chest. His message was from an unknown number, the same as mine. The message read, "You'll remember soon enough. The scars are the key." I froze. Scars? The word sent a chill through my veins. I hadn't told anyone about the strange scars that appeared on my body each morning. I couldn't understand how they'd known. But now, it seemed like someone had been watching me. Someone who knew far more than they should. I stared at Mark in disbelief. "What does this mean?" He shook his head, his voice barely a whisper. "I don't know, but I think we're getting closer to the truth. We need to go back. We need to retrace everything." The room felt colder, the air heavier. I couldn't escape the feeling that whatever was happening, it was leading us towards something bigger, something far more dangerous than we had anticipated. Chapter 6, The Final Truth. Days had passed since we found the last note, and the walls seemed to close in even tighter. Mark and I hadn't spoken much since that day. We were both exhausted, mentally and physically drained. The paranoia that had plagued us was wearing us down. Every time we opened our eyes, we expected something to be different, but it wasn't. The scars kept appearing. The notes kept coming. The mystery deepened, and we were still no closer to finding the answers. As I sat on the couch, staring at my phone, a sudden realization hit me. One that had been lingering at the back of my mind for days. Something I had ignored because I was too afraid to acknowledge it. The scars weren't random. They were messages. Messages from someone or something trying to tell me something I was too blind to see. I had to understand why. I had to find the truth. I grabbed my phone and called Mark. He picked up on the second ring, his voice hoarse. "I think I know what's going on," I said, trying to steady my voice. "I think the scars are trying to show us something." There was a long pause before Mark spoke again. "What do you mean?" "I think they're connected to the past, to something we've both forgotten." Suddenly, everything clicked into place. The scars, the messages, the notes, they weren't just happening to me. They were happening to Mark, too. We had both been marked by something from our past. The past we couldn't remember. Mark's voice cracked as he spoke. "I think you're right." We agreed to meet the next morning at the park, the same place where everything had started, where we had first noticed the first scar on my body. We needed to retrace our steps, to uncover the truth about what had happened. The following day, the sun was just beginning to rise when we met at the park. It was eerily quiet. The usual bustle of the city was absent, and the cold morning air made everything feel more surreal. I met Mark by the old oak tree, where we had first talked about the strange scars. "This is it," Mark said as he looked around nervously. "We're about to uncover something huge." We began walking along the path, retracing the steps of our past. As we walked, the memories began to flood back. Fragments of forgotten moments, glimpses of things I thought I'd never recall. It felt like we were unlocking a part of ourselves that had been locked away for too long. And then, just as I was about to speak, something caught my eye. It was a familiar object, something I hadn't seen in years, yet the memory came rushing back in an instant. There, beneath the old oak tree, was a small weathered box. The same box I had found years ago, long before any of this had begun. It had been buried here all along, just waiting for us to find it. I bent down and opened the box. Inside was a photograph of Mark and me, standing together in front of a house I had never seen before. But the strangest thing was that we both looked different, younger, happier. "What is this?" Mark asked, his voice barely a whisper. I turned the photograph over. There was something written on the back, in the same handwriting that had appeared on all the notes. "The past is not what it seems. Your scars are the key to what's been forgotten." I felt a chill run down my spine as the truth began to sink in. The scars weren't random. They were markers, symbols, if you will, of something we had forgotten, something that had been erased from our memories. But now it was all coming back. The truth, the past, and the reason why everything had been happening. We had made a mistake that had cost us our memories, our peace, and maybe even our lives. The box was just the beginning. The final piece of the puzzle was within reach, and that was when I heard the sound behind me, the unmistakable sound of footsteps.